Hollywood doesn't know how to write women. Women in the movies we watch nowadays seem to be one-dimensional, lacking depth, and only to be a supportive character to their male counterparts. We often see women characterized as one attitude, such as being strong, optimistic, knowing everything. This characteristic usually dictates their entire persona. We have multiple examples of some women in films today who fit this characterization we just previously explained. These characters are a response to feminist movements, such as Max from Stranger Things, as she represents women who want diversity and going beyond the normal narrative of a woman who just sit on the sidelines waiting for a man to come save her or the need to have a man. In current media, female characters are becoming beloved because they are so different than the non-feminist films of the past. Like Max in Stranger Things, women today in films are represented as strong, emotionless, and uncaring about others. These women are not like most girls, which in theory is meant to embody all girls, as we are in an era of trying to be different from standard female stereotypes. However, in so doing, all these characters are losing their realistic depth, becoming one-dimensional, and therefore, once again, ignoring feminist desires for complexity in female characters. We see numerous examples of this with the films like Twilight with Bella, Divergent with Trish, The Maze Runner with Teresa, and so on and on. In all these movies, the lead female character look the same and all start to blend into one. They represent a strong female lead, but they are really just there as a support or love interest for the male lead character in the film. Their main purpose is just to create romance in the film. Which brings us to the 2022 film, Persuasion, and why we are choosing to do an analysis on the female protagonist in this film, Anne Elliot. This movie was a recent release with a strong female protagonist. This film is the perfect study in Hollywood's understanding of the ideal female character. Our big cultural questions that arise from this film are: how does Anne represent Hollywood's understanding of women? What makes her character ineffective to the feminist movement? And how, amidst so much contemporary feminism, is Hollywood missing the mark?
So just to reestablish as we go into the literature review, we are discussing the female protagonist and the representation in particular of Anne in the film Persuasion. The conversation surrounding women in film has been ongoing since the inception of film, especially from a feminist point of view. According to our research, in early cinema and prior to 1917, women were deeply involved in all aspects of filming. But despite prominent women in the field, media was still dominated by men. The conversation about women in stories in particular found that their characters were often a lot lesser than or side characters compared to their male counterparts. So, for example, in action or fantasy stories with male protagonists, the women in the story are either sidekicks, girls back at home, or completely invisible. Furthermore, we found that not only is the media field dominated by men, and has it been historically dominated by men behind the camera, but also in front of the camera, and women remain underrepresented in media. Now, as we have moved into the contemporary 21st century, there have been many more female protagonists featured and female stories, but some argue that contemporary female protagonists are being forced into a male figurehead and therefore don't actually help with the forward march of feminism and equal rights. That being said, other people in this sphere feel that contemporary media is working to subvert gender stereotypes by subverting gender itself, and that the characters are driving the story, especially when people consider the film Hunger Games. They feel that critics feel that Katniss, rather than any other character, drove the narrative throughout. This discussion about the subversion of gender norms and kind of how that the feminine and the masculine works in the media and narrative process has created a lot of conversation about women in film being kind of caught between competing demands to be strong and independent while retaining their femininity. Some also say that we are substituting the shy woman with the strong, sexy, disassociative woman. The reactions to this are mixed, and even films aimed at a female audience often disappoint in depictions of independent women that real audience members can relate to. Many feel that modern female protagonists repudiate the idealized female heroines of yore, but do not adequately reflect the diversity of women's experience, especially in this complex contemporary era. It's important also that we bring up Laura Mulvey and her theory of visual pleasure and the narrative cinema. Mulvey is thought to be kind of the mother of feminist film theory in a lot of spaces. People feel that visual pleasure theory, it helps critics discern what the subconscious effects of the representation of women are. In particular, analytical concepts such as scopophilia, the male gaze, and voyeurism have become integral parts of the film lexicon, in large part due to the work of Laura Mulvey and feminist film theorists, the fundamental project of which can be said to center on making visible the invisible. That being said, many people feel that feminism in the internet era has been reduced to a marketing strategy. And going a bit more generally to kind of the waves of feminism, not just applying to media, we're currently in what many perceive to be the fourth wave. And the fourth wave of feminism embraces public discourse whilst retaining kind of the intersectionality and sex positivity of the third wave. Critics also feel that fourth wave feminism is almost exclusively present in media. So with all these kind of different takes on women in media and feminism in media, we just want to jump off from that conversation and kind of consider what that means in terms of our character Anne in the film Persuasion.
So what does the 2022 adaptation of Persuasion teach us about feminism and Hollywood's relationship with women? We can start off by talking about why Anne in this Persuasion failed. Anne Elliot in the novel by Jane Austen is known for being timid, selfless, and sorrowful. She is mature beyond her years and believes that her love and best years are behind her. Needless to say, she's a relatable woman. She has weaknesses and she has regrets. She has faults, and all these things make her triumphs and acts of courage that much more meaningful because we feel those things with her. Because she has multiple dimensions, that means that she is much more realistic and someone that we can learn from. This is what feminists want out of their media. They want someone they can learn from and see themselves in. And yet Hollywood takes that character and produce what they believe will be the most likable, charismatic version of her. They wanted her to be outspoken, to be strong, to be brave in every aspect, and therefore to lack dimension. She's not someone that we can relate to because she's just like every other Hollywood woman that's being represented in Hollywood movies right now. Anne Elliot in the 2022 adaptation is someone that we have seen so many times, and therefore her sorrow is something that we don't understand. Her triumphs are something that completely go over our heads because she's someone that doesn't face a lot of trials. Because she's so charismatic and outspoken, because she's so self-aware and pessimistic, it seems like every problem in her life is something that can be made fun of rather than felt. Needless to say, this one-dimensional character is a great representation of how Hollywood has been failing women. Hollywood believes that we want someone who's entertaining rather than someone who is meaningful, someone that we can relate to. And so they provide these characters that are fun and loud and hilarious and yet lack so much substance. And the reason why feminists are so torn up about this is because there's so many male counterparts to these women who do have dimensions, who have weaknesses and strengths that we can understand and see. A lot of times in these movies, women are surrounded by much more developed men, thus making these women stick out even more so than they did before. It doesn't matter that these women are less scantily clad. It doesn't matter that these women play much more critical roles if those roles are something that we don't care about because the character themselves is someone that we don't care about. This teaches us a lot about American culture in Hollywood. America is always looking for low-hanging fruit in order to appeal to audiences. They want the easiest answer for the biggest payoff, and that's why so many women are following this very general stereotype of being strong, of being outspoken, and of being someone who isn't a pushover. Yet Hollywood needs to realize that what feminists and women want from movies is someone who has a lot of faults, who is weak at times, who is strong at times, who doesn't have a quip for every moment, and isn't painfully self-aware in every moment either. We need someone who is real, and therefore we need better women. In conclusion, we see in the 2022 adaptation of Persuasion that Anne is representing Hollywood's understanding of women by being a very oversimplified, basic version of a woman, a hollow shell, one could say, for an easy appeal to female audiences, when in reality, we find ourselves being bored, being misrepresented, and infuriated by the shallowness of these characters. Anne's character is ineffective for the feminist movement because she is just another representation of the same character that Hollywood keeps producing, when in reality, the feminist movement in Hollywood is advocating for diverse, realistic women who are timid and have faults and weaknesses along with strengths. We want complex characters that are real, that we can learn from, and yet Anne is lacking in that category. Finally, how is Hollywood still missing the mark amidst this contemporary feminist world? And that's because Hollywood is just looking for easy cash grabs. They think this is enough of an appeal to appease women, when in reality, female audiences are getting wary of this constant regurgitation of the same character. Hollywood doesn't understand that despite providing characters that are strong in the plot, strong in their desires, because they have no complexity and because there is no depth and thought and love to these characters, we still will never be able to be satisfied. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we hope that you can start to find better women represented in Hollywood films and your next trip to the movie theater.